Hi and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing my second labor and delivery story with my son Matthias, which was my first VBAC. I want to warn you now, this is probably going to be a lengthy video, so get a snack or pause it and take some breaks, but let's get into it. So first I want to describe what a VBAC is, and it's spelled VBAC, and it's a vaginal birth after a cesarean. So basically it's for a woman who's had a cesarean birth already previously and now she is attempting to have a vaginal birth. So that's what a VBAC is. And I knew when I got pregnant, when I found out that I was pregnant for the second time, that I was going to try to VBAC. It was a no-brainer for me. It's what I had really wanted the first time around. It's what I had prepared for. And I knew in my heart that that's what I was going to set my goal as for my second pregnancy and delivery. So because I already had a cesarean, they have a couple of rules that you have to, or requirements that they want you to go by if you're trying to VBAC. And one of them is that you have to go into labor on your own. So they don't really want to force induction, like a traditional kind of induction. So you have to go into labor on your own. And I also had to be delivered by my due date. So they had scheduled a C-section for me on my due date, which was September 27th. Yeah. And the reason why they kind of don't want to force a labor, or they don't want you to go too far overdue, is because of the risk of uterine rupture. So that is slightly a little bit higher in women that have previously already had a cesarean birth. So those were the requirements that I had to follow in order to try for a VBAC birth. My doctors recommended that I take baby aspirin every day starting from 12 weeks to 36 weeks as a precaution against preeclampsia. So there's some research out there saying that if a woman that has a history of preeclampsia takes a baby aspirin every day for the majority of her pregnancy, that it lowers the chance of her getting preeclampsia in the next pregnancy. So I did not do that. It's something that I refuse flat out, but I will talk about the reasons why I didn't do that in another video. So Matthias was born September 26, 2018 at about 6:18 in the morning, and he was 6 pounds and 11 ounces. So he was literally born one day before his due date. So since I knew I wanted to be back, I researched all that I could. I looked up YouTube videos. I researched on Google, medical journals, books, anything that I could get my hands on to really support me in my decision to try for a VBAC and to learn all that I could about it. The whole pregnancy, I was looking up stuff, looking up other articles or other stories of women who have VBAC successfully, and just reading it, trying to keep myself encouraged. And definitely a lot of prayer went into this, and praying that I would be successful in having my VBAC. So my pregnancy went really well. I didn't really have too many issues. It went well. I knew that he was a boy this time, actually, because I had to take a lot more testing this time around, just as a precaution, because I had preeclampsia last time. So they just asked on one of the testings if I wanted to find out the gender, and I was like, sure, why not? The first time I didn't know, so this time I figured I'd try something different. So I did know he was a boy pretty early on, probably about like 9 weeks. I knew that he was a boy. So my blood pressure did begin to get a little bit elevated between weeks 36 and 38. And I remember going to the doctor and her seeing my blood pressure being, normal than it was for the whole rest of the pregnancy. And she was like, you've done well. Your baby's almost full term. You can deliver this baby now. Don't have any regrets or anything. She was really trying to get me to go over to the hospital, like right then. Like, go over to the hospital, get checked, do all the testing for preeclampsia and all that stuff. And I was just so dead set about, nope, ain't nobody cutting me open. I'm going to do this. I'm going to see this to the end. And it's funny because the doctor I had is actually the doctor that delivered my baby sister. So my mom had this doctor as well. And she told me, she's a worrywart, and she's kind of, I don't want to say doom and gloom. I don't want to say that, but she's very, let's say, over cautious. And I understand it's her job. She's an OB. She cares about her patients, want her patients to be well and the baby to be well. But I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I told her I would go home and I would relax. I would put my feet up and I would just try to take it easy for the rest of the pregnancy. And if I had any issues, like if I started feeling like really not myself, if I started to get like a migraine headache, because that's another sign of preeclampsia. If anything crazy came up, I would go right to the hospital. So she agreed with that. I went home and that's exactly what I did. I put my feet up. I tried not to do too much, but it's kind of hard to do. I already had a toddler at home. She was 20 months when he was born, so like 1.5. But that's what I did. I put my feet up and I just tried to take it super easy for the rest of my pregnancy. So I did get to go into labor on my own, which was super exciting. So the night before, it was like September 24th, 2 days before I actually gave birth. That night, my mucus plug came out. But at the time, I had no idea what it was. It just was like it kind of looked like snot. It's gonna be a little bit TMI in this video. I'm just trying to make sure that people are aware. So it looked like snot. And it was like yellowish, kind of clear, kind of milky substance. And I was like, okay, what is that? So it was about at 9 o'clock that Monday night. I laid down, I tried to go to sleep, but then the contraction started at 11 p.m. And I really didn't know what it was. Like, I hadn't really experienced Traivon Hicks throughout my pregnancy, not that I could remember. So I remember I texted my mom, I kind of let her know how I was feeling, like a slight tightening in my stomach, and it would last for a certain amount of time and then it would go away. Like, I had contractions with my first pregnancy, but I never had like those early contractions. So I didn't really know what to look for or what to expect. I text my mom, she let me know, yeah, it sounds like it's contractions, you know, just time them and keep me updated. So that's what I did, and they came about every 5 to 7 minutes, and then some of them were spaced out like every 12 minutes. So they were really irregular, kind of all over the place, but they were coming the whole rest of the night. From 11 o'clock on, I had contractions, well, you know, early contractions. So I had an appointment Tuesday morning, so I already knew I was going to the hospital pretty early in the morning. So I didn't worry about calling my doctor or rushing or anything like that. My second pregnancy, because the preeclampsia the first time around, was considered high risk. So I was at this point going to the hospital, I believe 2 times a week for NST. Every few days I was already going to the hospital to maternal fetal medicine. So I already was going that Tuesday morning. So I just wrote it out the night. And so that morning I was cleaning, I was making breakfast, because I kind of knew what was going on, or what was happening at least. And I hope that it wasn't false labor, because I was like, I'm really hoping that this is labor. So I remember I was cooking breakfast and I felt something trickling down my leg. And I'm like, well, what is that? So I go to the bathroom because I'm thinking maybe I peed myself, I don't know. Then I wiped myself and it was just like clear fluid. And I was like, okay, I don't know. But then as I continued to get ready for the morning, get ready for the day, and go over to the hospital, it kept trickling down my leg. So I was like, yeah, I think that's my water. I think my water is breaking. But it wasn't a big gush. Like sometimes you hear about a big gush or whatever, or a big puddle. It wasn't like that. It was just like a steady stream of leaking fluid. So that's how my water broke. So my mom came over and took me to my appointment. She drove me because by now the contractions were getting kind of intense. Like they weren't super crazy, but I definitely couldn't drive. I have a stick shift, so there was no way I was going to be able to drive that. Plus I had my baby in a car, or my firstborn in a car. So she came over and she's the one who drove me over to the hospital. And the ride over to the hospital was terrible. Like every bump hurt, I was having regular contractions at this point. So every 3 to 5 minutes I was having contractions. And yeah, the ride was not fun at all. And I could tell when the contractions were about to start. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like a light tightening, and then it gets more gradual tightening of the whole entire abdomen. So like I said, at that point they weren't like super painful, but I did have to like stop and breathe through them at that time for the contractions that I had on the car ride over. So once we got to the hospital, I told my doctor, you know, I believe it was just a regular OB appointment. So I told my doctor, I think my water broke. And she was like, oh yeah, okay. So she checked me out, and they have this test where they can test the fluid to see if it's actually an amniotic fluid or regular, you know, just pee or sweat or whatever. So she tested out on a little piece of paper. It turned a different color. She was like, yep, your water broke. You can head right over to the hospital. And I was so excited. This was also the first time in this pregnancy that I was checked for dilation, because they didn't really want to check me early or at my earlier appointments, because they didn't really want to induce labor. Sometimes that can induce labor. But she checked me and she was like, oh, you're 2 centimeters. You can go right over to the hospital. So I was super excited. I was like, okay, let's go. So once I got to triage at the hospital, my paperwork hadn't come over yet. So they were trying to send me the triage to do their own kind of test to see, you know, if my water had broken. And I'm sitting there waiting for my paperwork from my own doctor. I'm like, no, my doctor sent me directly over here. She already said my water is broken. Let's get this party started. So they finally got my paperwork, and I was like, yep, you can go right on up to labor and delivery. So that's what we did. We went up to labor and delivery. So it's kind of different if you have just contractions and say your water hasn't broken, or maybe you're not even dilated yet. And if you go to the hospital, they could turn you away. But for me, my water had already broken. And so once your water breaks, they really want you to deliver within like a 24 to 48 hour period. Because my water had broken, I was able to go right over to labor and delivery and get labor started that way. But throughout the whole process, I never felt rushed or I never felt pressured to deliver by a certain time. They pretty much left me alone, which was great. And I didn't have to worry about rushing or anything like that. So once I got to L&D, they set me up to a continuous fetal monitoring. I also had, of course, a hip lock, and I got on the exercise ball, and I wasn't allowed to walk around freely because I was set up to the monitor. At this time, my blood pressure did start to go up. And I remember a doctor came in, and she came in about 3 times recommending that I start the magnesium, which, you know, I was really dead set against because I had such a bad experience with it the first time. And in my head, I'm thinking if I get the magnesium, then it's going to slow down my labor, then I'm going to failure to progress again, and then I'm going to have a C-section, then the baby's going to have to go to the NICU. Like, I'm thinking all this stuff because that's the way it went the first time. So I was like, no, I don't want the magnesium. She kept coming in. And then the last time she came in, my blood pressure was really high. Like, it was like 173 over something. I don't know, but it was high. And I remember my mom came over, she talked to me, she kind of just rubbed my face and was like, look, you can do this. You don't want something really bad to happen to you. You don't want something really bad to happen to the baby. So I was crying. I was bawling my eyes out because I just saw it going from 0 to 100 real fast. And I was like, I'm not going to get my vaginal birth. So yeah, but I did get the magnesium. And what's really crazy is that the experience was totally different this time. Like, it was so different. I didn't get that really loopy sensation. It made me a little bit hot, but not like intensely hot like the first time. And I also didn't have to deal with the nausea that I had the first time. So I didn't throw up during the labor and delivery with my second pregnancy at all, which was really great. The experience was totally different with the magnesium. And I think just because the first time I had the preeclampsia, things were so far gone. And that's why I took to it that way. But this time it was bearable. It was manageable. It wasn't really that bad getting on magnesium this time. So I kept my eyes closed pretty much the whole rest of the labor. That's kind of like one of my coping mechanisms. And I remember I had to take my contacts out just in case I had to have a C-section. They kind of wanted me to be prepared. So I took my contacts out. I had my glasses and I had them on if I ever had to look at something, but I really didn't that much. So I had my contacts out and I just had my eyes closed pretty much the whole time. So after about 4 hours, I wasn't really progressing that much. So that's when they decided to start Pitocin. And they started really low and then it gradually went up. And so the contractions started to get really painful at this point. And I remember I was just tensing my whole entire body, like tensing my body with each contraction because of the pain, and that my mom had to keep reminding me to relax and, you know, just kind of breathe, and breathing definitely did help. So that's what I tried to do throughout the whole rest of the labor, is just really breathe through the contractions. But yeah, I tensed my body up the whole entire time, just kind of like fighting against the pain. So I remember one of my favorite positions during my second labor and delivery was being on hands and knees, and at a certain point my body just started pushing for me. It was totally involuntary, but it was like with each contraction, I could feel my body pushing. So I was stuck at 6 for a while. And at this point, I was just tired. I was hungry. I was just zoned out, like just really focusing on the contractions. I couldn't really think about anything else. I was just becoming one with the contractions pretty much. So they gave me a peanut ball at one point, and I was bedbound because I was on the magnesium, so I didn't get to walk around and all that. But I was fine with that because I was tired. But I had a really comfortable bed, and I could move it up, I could move it down. It was really comfortable, and I could adjust it however I wanted to. So the peanut ball is kind of like an exercise ball, but it's shaped like a peanut, and they just put that in between my legs, and I laid on my side, and that kind of like helps the baby to descend down the birth canal and open you up a little bit more down there. And so every 30 minutes they have me switch sides, and the peanut ball really helped. But having the peanut ball made the contractions even more intense. So it helped, but yeah, it definitely was more intense contractions with the peanut ball. Like I said, I was happy I was in the bed because I had no energy. All I could focus on was getting through each contraction and preparing for the next contraction. So the contractions were getting super painful, and I remember I would just squeeze the side handrail on the bed. I would squeeze it really, really hard. Or I would have someone squeeze my hand, and that kind of pressure kind of helped a bit. It kind of took my mind off of my own pain, and placed it into whatever was being squeezed. So whether it was my right hand or my left hand, that really helped for me. So kind of like acupressure, really. So I didn't have any back labor that I could think of during my labor and delivery. So that's not something that I've personally experienced. And for my really hard contractions, I remember I was making this groaning noise. But what's so funny is I didn't even know I was making it. At the end, I was making those noise for like the really painful contractions. And I remember I was coming out of one and I was like, who is making that noise? Until I realized that it was me. And it was so funny because my support people were asleep at this point, so I knew it was me. And it was like so funny, but it was like this low noise, like and I made that sound throughout the whole contraction, and it really helped. I don't know why, but yeah. So at the end, I wanted to get an epidural. They told me I could get an epidural at any time. It didn't matter how early or how late in the labor it was. And at the end, I wanted it, not really so much due to the pain, just because I had no energy. Like, I felt like exhausted. I was hungry. I was tired. I was just like, no, I've been doing this for too long. And I was in labor for a really long time. So from that Monday night, starting at 11 p.m. or 9 p.m., all the way till Wednesday morning when he was born. So it was a long time. I wasn't able to eat. I think I had some ice chips, but I can't remember that much. So yeah, just ice chips and an IV, and I was exhausted at that point. So I told my mom that's what I wanted to do. When the nurse came in the next time, she was like, okay, I'll get the anesthesiologist, but let's just check you, see how far you are. She checked me and I was at a 9. And I was like, what? Like, I was so excited. I was like, yes, I'm at a 9. I'm almost there, because I was stuck at 6 for a really long time. They didn't want to check me too much because once your water's already broken, being checked eternally can lead to a higher chance of you getting an infection. So they didn't want to check me too much. Now I was trying to get them to check me all the time. I was like, let me know. But yeah, I was at a 9, and just knowing that motivated me to continue without the epidural. So that helped a little bit. And after that, I got to 10 kind of quickly. So I remember I was at 10 centimeters dilated, but I had a cervical lip. And at the time, I didn't know what it was, but because of my doula studies, I know what it is now. So it's because my cervix wasn't completely thin out, like it was swollen. And I believe it was swollen because I was pushing, like my body was pushing with each contraction earlier than I needed to be pushing. So it caused one side of my cervix to swell. So that swelling had to go down before I was able to push. So yeah, so I had to wait for that. And I think that probably took about like 30 minutes or an hour or so. And I was on my hands and knees at this time. So I was at like a 2, and then it went to a 1, and then it went to a 0. And once it was at 0, then I was able to start pushing. So then the doctor came in and I did a couple of practice pushes. So I was in the bed, like slightly reclined, and I remember one person grabbed each leg and they held it and pushed it back to my chest. So pushing during labor and delivery, the best way I can describe it is like trying to push a bowling ball out of your butt. Yeah, that's what it's like. I know that's such a graphic visual, but that's really what it feels like. And I want women or other people to be aware that that's kind of the sensation you're going for or to expect. So yeah, so that's what it felt like. It had me doing the 10 count of 3 breaths each contraction. So whenever I would get a contraction, they would count to 10 and you would do that 3 times. So I remember they were doing that, and the first 2 times I'm giving it my all. I'm like really pushing for those first 2 10 counts. But by that 3rd one, man, I was so exhausted, and I was making the noises like I was putting forth the effort, but I really wasn't. I was just like it was so half-hearted by the time they got to the 3rd one. But you know, it was effective overall. But yeah, so you know, of course I'm exhausted, I'm hungry, I'm tired, but it was a relief to actually push with the contractions instead of just staying there. Because at the end, the contractions are really painful, especially going through transition. They're really painful. And not being able to push is just like being in pain for no reason. I mean, there's a reason, but it's like, it's harder than actually pushing with the pain. Because when you push with the pain, well, at least for me, it doesn't feel as bad. Like, you don't really feel the pain. You're just putting forth the effort to go with the contraction, with the pain. So it offsets it, kind of. I remember at one point, they were like, he's right there. And I thought they was lying to me. I was like, nope, I've been pushing all this time. He ain't right there. They're lying to me. Every time they say he's right there and he ain't out yet, they're lying. It was a mirror, but I couldn't really see that much anyway because I had my glasses off. And I really did keep my eyes closed most of the time. I had an oxygen like cup on my nose, just to, I guess, help with the baby's heart rate. And it wasn't a bad experience. Like, it was breathing in cool, crisp air, so that was kind of nice, but it was kind of annoying too, just because it was already over my face and I was already sweating, so it was like a little claustrophobic feeling. But that's just something that I had to do during the pushing stage of labor. Like, I wasn't on it the whole time. It was just during the pushing stage. They had me with the oxygen mask on. I remember as his head was coming out, they would like reach down and feel his head. So I was like, okay. So I reached down and felt it, and I was like, no. And I jerked my hand back right away. It was so disgusting. And I remember everybody in the room just laughing. Like, they bust out laughing because of my reaction. Like, they thought that it would motivate me, but it didn't. It was nasty. It was slimy. It was soft and squishy. And I was like, why does the baby's head feel like that? Like, to me, that didn't make any sense. It makes sense now because, of course, their bones aren't fused together. But it was so disgusting. And I was like, why did they just make me do that? These people are nasty. So yeah, so I felt that, and I was like, nope, that's nasty. I'm not doing that again. So it kind of motivated me to get pushing even more so I can get the whole entire body out. But yeah, it was a yucky feeling. It kind of felt like one of those stress balls where, you know, if you squeeze it and like some of the goop pokes out of the hole or whatever. Don't reach down. Don't reach down, people. So I ended up pushing for about an hour and a half. It didn't really feel like it lasted that long, the pushing stage. And once the baby's head was out, then they stopped me, and you know, they suctioned his nose and suctioned his mouth and all of that. After that, I gave one big push, and I remember I screamed, but it wasn't really due to the pain. It's just because I was giving it all of my effort. Like, every little last drop of effort that I had left, I bared down and I pushed, and he was out. And the sensation was so weird. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like slimy and like, just like, I don't know. It was like a really weird sensation. I remember that. And it was like a little alien coming out. I didn't know what to expect, but yeah. And so then after he was delivered, then the placenta came out. And that was an even weirder sensation. Everything was just like really slimy and slippery and just, yeah. Then the placenta was delivered and the whole entire birth was over. I remember seeing a lot of blood, and that's even with my glasses off. I saw a lot of blood, and I could kind of see that my mom and the doctor was getting a little bit worried. So they had my placenta on the table. I guess they weighed it and all of that. But you could see blood everywhere. Like, it looked like a murder scene up in there. I'm not even gonna lie. There was blood on the floor. There was blood in the container with the placenta. There was blood all over the doctor. Yeah, but I guess it wasn't too much blood because I didn't need a transfusion or anything like that. But yeah, it was a lot of blood everywhere. So once he was out, they confirmed he was a boy. They weighed him. They did his APGAR scores. They cut the umbilical cord. And then they put him on my chest, and he breastfed right away. Like, we had no issues with breastfeeding. He was a champ, which I was so thankful for because my experience the first time around went so well. I was like, surely this time it's not going to go that well, but it did. So yeah, breastfeeding went great with him as well. I did tear. I had a 2nd-degree tear. I had to be sewed up. And at this point, when they said tear, I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm really nervous and really scared because like, I don't have no epidural. They about to sew me up with no epidural. So I was really scared and nervous, but the doctor was great. Like, I had a really great doctor. He gave me like the lidocaine or Novocaine that they give you to numb the area. Those were just a couple of slight pricks that didn't hurt that bad, but I didn't feel any of the sewing. Baby was already on my chest at this point, so all the pain, like, I know people say the pain just goes away, but at that moment in time, the pain just went away. I had the baby. I had my VBAC. I was happy. I was proud of myself. I didn't really feel any pain for the sewing up of the tear. So I stayed in the hospital for 5 days after the birth because my blood pressure again was still being regulated, but it wasn't as bad as the first time, and I was not declared as having preeclampsia, just like hypertension during pregnancy. So I was in the hospital for 5 days, and I was prescribed the labetalol, which I also took post-birth up to 6 weeks after the birth. And I also had the magnesium 24 hours after birth, but it didn't hinder anything. The baby still was able to room in with me. It was a good experience all the way around. And I just remember feeling like really validated, like just really happy that I had did it, happy that I had did it without an epidural. And I was just like, you know, this is what I had longed for. But I do want to say, if you're a woman who's had a cesarean birth, maybe you're trying for a VBAC, or maybe you've had only a cesarean birth, you are not less than a woman. I remember I struggled with that a lot my first time around. I felt like I wasn't a woman because I had cesarean or whatever. You're not less than a woman. You're still a mom. You still created that baby. You still carried that baby. That baby still needs you. The baby still loves you. And the baby is still a part of you, however you deliver your baby. When your child grows up and goes to college or gets their first job or whatever, no one's going to ask them, hey, did your mom deliver you C-section or vaginal? You know, because that's important. No, it's not a big deal. You are still a woman no matter how you deliver your baby or how you decide to deliver your baby. So that is my labor and delivery story with my second, with Matthias. It went really well. It was a great experience. I felt really good after his birth. Stay tuned for my next labor and delivery story, which will be baby Kenzo. That one was even better than this one, so you'll definitely want to look out for that. I also want to mention that I started a GoFundMe for making postpartum baskets for moms. So if you're interested in supporting me in that cause, I will leave a link below. I also want to shout out some of the people that have already donated, and that is Traivon Hicks, Mark Marini, and an anonymous donor. And I also want to shout out Tamika Hicks and Ethel McGriff for sharing the post on Facebook. That's all I have for today. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. I know there's some parts in there like, oh. But I thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember to let your story be your power. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.